presentations. You ready? Okay. Very first presentation will be from the Bucks County Food Shed Alliance, and your name is?
My name is Susan Pearson.
Susan Pearson, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you
Appreciate
very
you
much.
coming, and the title is, I believe, 100 Ways to Build a Garden, correct?
That's right.
All yours.
Okay. How's the sound? Is that okay?
You can take that out. You don't have
Oh,
to.
good. That's
There
a
you go.
good thing.
There you go.
Much easier. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Pearson. I'm a board member of the Bucks County Food Shed Alliance. And has any of you heard of it? Nobody's heard? That's okay. Unfortunately, you're not alone. We're an organization that was started in 2006 and started the Wrightstown Farmers Market as a way for people like us to find food that they could really trust, that wasn't treated with pesticides, that was grown locally, and for a place for farmers to sell what they grew. So it was this mutually beneficial thing. Today, the farmers market in Wrightstown has over 30 vendors. It's year-round. We have weekends, 2 weekends each month in the winter. We have our farmers and other vendors come. And we now run the Doylestown Farmers Market, which was started almost 45 years ago. And we also have programs every year. This program is an addition, but we have monthly programs every first Wednesday of the month scattered throughout the county. The next one will be at the Ben Salem Library, and it's basically a gardening 101. One of our farmers will come and answer people's questions about getting started in a garden, how do you fertilize, what do you do, all that stuff. And we have other programs that we do, mostly on gardening in the spring, and then in the fall, we're doing one on herbs, on not growing herbs, but keeping your herbs through the winter, ways to preserve your herbs through the winter. Then we're doing one on kimchi. Anybody know what kimchi is?
I love to make it. I make it all the time.
You showed, anybody know what it is? Okay. If you don't know what kimchi is, it's the Korean national condiment and it's like sauerkraut. But they make it with different ingredients, and they also put a Korean hot pepper in it. And it's, if you open a jar, when I go to the Korean grocery store, if I'm not making my own, over in North Wales, and I open the jar, my roommate, my tenant, comes in the kitchen, she said, "Did you get some kimchi?" Because it's so smelly, and it's really wonderful. And I'm getting 2 Korean women to come and teach us how to make kimchi.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, one's from Huntington Valley, and the other is a younger woman from Buckingham. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then our last program, which doesn't apply to anybody here probably, but it's on making your own baby food. We're proud, all the way up in Upper County. And we have a Dr. Julia Hellstrom, who's an osteopath in Doylestown. She's got 2 young kids, so she's going to teach that. And in the summer, we have farm tours, and those are going to be really wonderful. The first one is Love Grows down in Snipes Farm in Morrisville. Which is north and which is south? Which is south?
Let's see, that's west, so.
Okay.
North.
So I'm always gesturing, but now I realize I'm probably gesturing the wrong direction. So south in Morrisville at Snipes Farm, and then up in Upper County, a farm that has a lot of vegetables and some fruits and lamb. And then in Plumsteadville, Bedminster Orchards. And the young guy who runs that orchard he may be 23 years old, I'm not sure, and he's been doing it for several years now. Just amazing what he's built on his family farm. So always have 3 farm tours every summer. We're committed to sustainable agriculture for both the farming, for the farmers, and for the consumers. So that's what we do. It takes up a lot of my time, and now we're starting to get requests for programs, and that seems to be me. So one of the other board members and I, who both of us are gardeners, wanted to do a sort of a basic how-to, some different ways you can think about gardening. Are all of you gardeners? I guess you all are. It's okay to shake your head up or down. Your flower garden? Okay. Okay. Okay, let's see now. Is this going to work? Yes. This is our mission. We'll go back a little bit to our mission. We're building a resilient local food system through education, connection, and collaboration. So our programs are education. We do education programs at the farmers market. We collaborate with Del Valle University, sometimes with Heritage Conservancy, which my dad started. And we collaborate with other organizations to do things. As I said, we have the Doylestown and Wrightstown Farmers Market. If you're curious about us, about the Food Shed and what we do, you can go to bucksfoodshed.org. You can go there and sign up for our monthly newsletter. And in there, you'll get the information about our farm tours and our other programs. Back here, we have all of our programs. You can pick that up. We started a chapter of Buy Fresh, Buy Local, and I don't know how many of you have ever, unfortunately we don't have a picture here, when you're out and about other places, if you've ever seen this logo, this doesn't need to be, and what that does is it lets you know that that food was produced locally and sustainably. So we're looking for farmer chapters for farmer members, restaurant members. But this one, if you see this in a restaurant, you see it on the menu, that you'll know then that they buy from local farms and they support their local farms. And you can see we do also collaborate with Rolling Harvest. How many of you have ever heard, with Extension, Bucks County Extension, how many of you ever heard of Rolling Harvest Food Rescue? A few of you over here, a couple of you over here, and how many donate to food pantries sometimes? And you probably have one or two here at the Heights and maybe a couple other places in Warminster. Well, a few years ago, Kathy Snyder, and I always like to give her, urge people to support what she does. She was living in New Hope. She was volunteering at the food pantry in Lambertville, and she was really appalled at the quality of food. It was all so-called food that's non-perishable, which is sort of an oxymoron almost, right? No fresh food, nothing green, nothing really good. She came over to the farmers market in New Hope, which I was running at the time, and asked if she could I ask the farmers for some food, some fresh food. She got a little bit that way, and she quickly realized she wouldn't get much, so she started to build direct relationship with farmers. And as of last year, she had probably collected 1 million, that was 2011, I think. She had collected over 1.5 million pounds of food. She goes to the farms, she takes it to a distribution center, and from there it goes to the various food pantries throughout the county. It's just amazing. Just amazing. Rolling Harvest Food Rescue. Really, she's really inventive. And you can read the rest. These are our stakeholders in farming, education, healthcare, restaurants, and government. I've already gone through all that stuff. We have the Speakers Bureau, which right now, that's me. But I do a program called Eating on the Wild Side, and it's about how to, when you go to the market, whether it's a farmer's market, which is what we're urging, or to the grocery store, how do you select that vegetable or fruit for maximum nutrition? And that's a really fun one. How do you store it to keep it fresher longer? How do you cook it to get the best out of it? What do you look for? If you don't know the specific varieties, what do you look for? That's another PowerPoint. And at the farmers market, we have programs mostly for kids and chef demos. So on to the garden. So how will you build your garden this year? You can just go from a small one to, again, it's not that big, but you can make it really beautiful and make it contained. So here's some of the many approaches are. The first one I'm not going to cover, because we've all grown up with row gardening. And that's really the least efficient way to garden. Raised beds and square foot gardening, vertical gardening, containers, spiral, hay bale, or any combination. So before you continue, sometimes people will say, get this kind of soil and put it in your garden, but don't do it if you're going to eat that. But you don't know what's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years. You want to make sure whatever you put in your garden now, if somebody wants to grow a vegetable garden there in 10, 20, 30 years, that there are not any heavy metals in it. So just really be careful. Composting. How many of you are interested in having raised beds with the sides on? Yes? Do you have that now? Any of you have that now?
Yes.
You have that now. I was just telling Donna, somebody gave me, so cedar or rough cut oak are really good. I had rough cut oak made up at Haycock Lumber, had the boards cut. It's been 20 years, and some of those boards are still intact. They're getting pretty bad at this point. But you got 15 good years out of boards. That's amazing. You wouldn't get that many at all from pine. And again, think about including a catchment system, rain barrels, drip hoses, and just before you put in a garden, you probably know this. I'm just noticing my punctuation is not correct. Well, that was actually Lisa, that wasn't me. Make sure you adapt your garden to the sun and not try to keep changing things. You have to plan ahead. So you want to build your soil. Our traditional row garden relies on good soil for the crop grown, hard work, weeding, proper location, and the right amount of water drainage. And this is true too for any kind. But with some of the other methods, you're going to cut way down on the hard work and the weeding and the amount of water if you keep it up. If you keep up. Okay. All right, now. How do I make it?
So hit escape.
Okay.
You want to go to the other video, right?
Oh, that's right. Oh, that one got, yeah, that one, sorry. That one we want to. All right. No? Ooh, that's not good.
Do you need help?
Yes. How do I start this little video? Anybody interested in vermiculture? Having a worm bin? Give me a clue with your faces. Yes. No.
We're not sure. Okay,
Right.
what are we trying to do?
We're going to start that video. I thought I took that other one out.
So you want to use the ones we brought up, right?
This one, can you?
Think this is going to play? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
So let's go here.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. There you
And you
go.
want the vermiculture, so this one?
Yeah. And then,
Want me to hit play?
yeah, but how do you do it? How do you get full again for this one? Oh, that's right there. Thinking,
So-
this system is so different. How do I do it? Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yes.
So you've got all
Just
these
gonna
great
play this
kitchen
little
scraps
video.
that you want to compost for your garden, but you don't have space for a
Okay,
compost
sound.
pile. So maybe a worm bin is what you need. You can buy a ready-made worm bin, or you can build one yourself. I'll show you how. First, take a large plastic storage container. About 15 gallons should work. Make sure it has a lid. Buy an extra lid, too. Drill some drainage holes in it. It's great kitchen scraps that you want to compost for your garden, but you don't have.
It's not muted on here. You can't see the muted signal.
No, it's all the way up. Oh, it is muted. No, wait, unmute, okay.
We both have different, we both have Apple, so. What?
So you've got all these great kitchen scraps that you want to compost for your garden, but you don't have space for a compost pile. So maybe a worm bin is what you need. You can buy a ready-made worm bin, or you can build one yourself. I'll show you how.
Can you
First,
turn this
take a
on?
large
And I'll
plastic
move
storage
it.
container. About 15 gallons should work. Make sure it has a lid.
But it cuts in, it's been cutting in and out.
Do you want me to go back?
Try again, I guess, and then I probably don't need, it's pretty clear what he's talking about.
All these great kitchen scraps that you want to compost for your garden, but you don't have space for a compost pile. So maybe a worm bin is what you need. You can buy a ready-made worm bin, or you can build one yourself. I'll show you how.
I don't think you would.
First, take a large plastic storage container. About 15 gallons should work. Make sure it has a lid.
Can you hear it?
Buy an extra lid
No,
too.
Okay. Let me
Drill
just,
some drainage holes
let me
in it.
just narrate it.
You want to put about 25.
All right. So all he's saying is get a big bin, you put about 25 holes in it, more toward the top. You don't put them on the bottom part of it. And you put holes in the top, you get an extra lid, and then you put that up. And it will drain out some of the liquid that the worms create. Then you want paper scraps, you can put it through your paper shredder, you can rip it yourself, and you want to get them damp, like a really well wrung out sponge. And that's called the bedding. They need, and then you get leaves. And those are a mix. You can see there are some oak leaves in there, but you don't want to have all oak leaves. You want to have a mix. And oak leaves are really tough. So nice maple leaves, they break down quickly. And then mix that stuff up. I don't know what he's saying now.
Looks like you put some coffee grounds.
Could have, yeah, you can put coffee grinds, you put a little dirt in. These are red wiggler worms. If you've ever had a compost pile and have you seen those little worms, those little red worms, not the bigger worms? Those are red wigglers. And they're the ones you want for your vermicompost. And you can order them. They're easy to buy. You need about 1 pound, I think, of worms. Something you'd never think you'd buy by the pound, but worms. Then you mix in your compost, your garbage. He's doing it very, but if you have a fair amount of stuff, you just wiggle it in, make sure that you get more leaves in there. What is this?
Schneider vinegar? Yeah, right.
I guess, yeah, a little. So what that does, it will help the decomposition. It's sort of like a starter for some of the decomposition of the leaves. Looks like he's mixing methods. And at the end, we tried to get videos that were really short. But at the end, what you want to do is when there's a lot of decomposed, when they've gone through a lot of the stuff, and there's a lot of that black gold, a lot of that wonderful underneath, is you move everything to one side, and then you put new bedding in and new food in on the other side, and they'll migrate over. You still have to get the worms out of there. Okay,
Can I ask a question, please?
of course.
Why would we want to do this?
Why would you want to do that? You would want to do it if you don't want to have a compost pile, if you don't produce lots and lots of kitchen waste.
What would be the purpose of
Oh,
this soil that
that is really amazing fertilizer. So that's I planted her here. It's really wonderful fertilizer. My brother Bob told me this story of having a grapefruit tree in his house, in a pot in South Philly. And it just sat there year after year, and he bought some little pouch of vermicomposting stuff, and he put it on the tree and watered it and forgot about it. And then one day he came downstairs, he thought, what is that? What's that wonderful smell? The tree had finally bloomed after a couple decades of sitting there. So it's wonderful fertilizer.
How long does it take for it to decompose?
That I'm not sure. I think about 3 months. It'll take a while for them to really get that that beautiful fine soil. That might be long. I'm not 100% sure. Any other questions?
I have one more question.
Yes.
In what type of environment would you keep the worms?
You need to keep them, they can take fairly cold, but not freezing. They'll die in your compost pile. And you don't want to get over, I think, 80 or so degrees. Probably in the 70-degree range is really ideal.
So that's something you want to keep in your basement?
You can
say?
be in a basement, depending on, if you have a laundry room, you can keep them in there.
You have to keep them inside though.
No, you could keep that bin outside, depending on what your house situation is and, my niece had one and sometimes it would get a little, if it's too wet, if you have too much garbage in there, it'll get too wet and the worms will try to get out. And that's what happened with her.
The part of the need for the combination of the kitchen scraps, the green stuff, and the paper and the leaves
Right.
is you need a certain ratio of carbon versus nitrogen. If you have too much of the green stuff, it's going to get like real wet and kind of moldy. You need that combination in there. So that's why you saw him kind of layering the brown stuff with the green stuff.
And as those leaves get damp, the worms will eat them too and turn everything into the compost, into the worm compost. And that's true. We'll go through regular composting too. It's true for regular composting. You need to have the proper ratio of browns to greens.
So that's why you have the worm.
The worms speed it up and they make it more fertile. So it's actually a fertilizer. If you end up with compost, you can put a nice thick layer on your garden, but you wouldn't want to do that with vermiculture. It's too rich.
And just to be clear, you did state the worms can be kept outside, but it still has to be a relatively controlled
Right.
environment because they can't get above 80 and
Something
you
like
don't want them to go
freeze.
below. Exactly.
Right, so you don't want to put that dark worm bed in the sun. You want to keep it in a cool, shady spot. And it might be easier to always be assessing the situation if you have it inside. My niece would come home and her husband didn't have the same tolerance, so she'd try to get them, make sure they weren't crawling all over the floor by the time he came home. Okay, this is not one we want. There we go. So here's for regular composting. Yeah. And then we'll. Oops, sorry. It was already on.
Click on it again, you hit the screen, it's paused.
Oh.
Most people think composting is as simple as throwing all food and garden waste into a container and leaving it there for a couple of years. While you will get compost that way, you can produce much better compost and get it much more quickly if you follow these simple guidelines for the perfect recipe. There are 4 ingredients for good compost: greens, browns, air and moisture. These 4 need to be balanced correctly for best results. The ingredients you add to a compost heap contain carbon and nitrogen. The ratio of carbon to nitrogen determines whether we label it a green or a brown. Ingredients that have a relatively high nitrogen content and a carbon to nitrogen ratio below 30:1 are called greens. Ingredients with a lower nitrogen content, in other words a higher carbon to nitrogen ratio, are called browns. Colour isn't always a reliable indicator of what is a green or a brown material. For example, fresh grass clippings when spread out and left to dry are still considered a green ingredient even though they've turned a brownish colour because really all they've lost is water. On the other hand, straw is always considered a brown because before it was cut the main stems had died and much of the plant's nitrogen had gone into the seed as protein. Good examples of greens to add to your compost pile are grass clippings which haven't been sprayed with weed killer, vegetable waste, fruit peel, annual weeds before they've developed seeds, and old bedding plants. Don't compost animal products such as meat and try to avoid adding diseased plant material or fats and oils. Good examples of browns include sawdust, straw, wood chippings, shredded brown cardboard and fallen leaves. Bedding from herbivorous pets such as guinea pigs is ideal as their manure adds a bit of extra nitrogen to the mix. Compost decomposes much faster if you chop the ingredients up, so shredding woody materials and tearing up cardboard speeds up the process because there is then more surface area exposed to the microbes that decompose the compost. However, avoid shredded evergreen trees such as Leylandi because they don't compost well and the pine resin can inhibit seed growth. When making compost, you want to aim for 2 to 3 times more brown materials than greens. At least initially, though some more greens can be added as the compost cooks. For most gardeners, the biggest challenge is therefore collecting enough brown materials and not just piling in loads of greens, which will result in a soggy, smelly mess. Never add lots of grass clippings in one go, as they will just form a slimy matted layer. Air is vital to the composting process, so it's important to mix the ingredients in together and never squash them down. By turning or remixing the compost, more air is introduced, which speeds up decomposition. The fourth vital ingredient is water. If, like me, you stockpile brown materials, you'll need to water the pile to get things going when first mixing it. Build the compost pile up with layers of browns and greens, watering it where necessary to produce a moist but not soggy mixture. A good compost heap has a slightly sweet composty smell. If it smells sour or rotten, then it either has too many greens or is too wet. In either case, the remedy is to mix more brown materials in to compensate. By getting the right balance of 2 or 3 parts browns to 1 part greens with moisture and air, you're giving the microbes that decompose the materials the best conditions to work in. As they break the organic matter down, they give off heat, which in turn speeds up the decomposition. In a well-mixed heap, temperatures can easily reach over 150 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 degrees Celsius. This heap, for example, was mixed several days ago and it's already been cooking nicely, though it's starting to cool a little now. After a few more days, I will remix it to introduce more air and to bring materials from the edges into the centre. Several weeks later, the heap will cool and worms can move in to finish the process. If you follow this recipe, you should get a fine, crumbly textured compost. Any remaining large bits can be sieved out and put into the next compost heap you build, leaving you with the very best food for your plants.
All right, any questions? Questions? Okay, a couple things. One is you hear a lot of different things. I've heard more browns than that. The ratio could be 4 to 1. I think I've heard that. And you can stockpile your leaves. If you rake up your leaves and put them in bags, what do you do here in Warminster? They suck them up on like they do in Doyle's. They pick up
bag
the
'em.
bags.
Yeah,
So you could stockpile the bags.
You can also use coffee in tea bags as well.
Coffee, you could put coffee in tea bags. What else did he say that I? Oh, he said not to put in seedy things. Now there's a gardener named Lee Reich who has written wonderful books on growing unusual fruit, on pruning, on weedless. He has a book on weedless gardening, and he says he puts everything in his compost pile. He'll put old cotton clothes, he'll put weedy things, he'll put diseased plants in because the decomposition process, if it heats up, it will kill those pathogens and it will kill the seeds. And time. You don't always have to go to that much trouble. You are a gardener, right?
Yes.
So, do you always turn do you have a compost pile?
Yes, it's
Do you-
broken. I have a compost bin. It's broken right now. Yeah, we would turn it.
Okay.
And as far, I don't put diseased material in it though because mine doesn't. It's not big enough to get hot enough
Oh, okay.
to kill everything. So I tend to err on the cautious
Yeah.
side with
Well-
putting in diseased material.
Sometimes, or you could just put that diseased material in a separate spot if you have enough room for that. But
No, I
you-
put everything in my compost pile, and I have no issues with seeds germinating or
Yeah.
anything because
If
it does get
lasts
hot.
long- If it's there
It's
long
hot.
enough, then
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a large, it's probably 6 by 4.
Oh, this big pile.
Yeah.
And then you just build another one, you let that one sit?
Yeah,
and
well, I
then
have
you-
it broken in half, so I build one, and I'm actually ready to use that this year, and I'm building another one over the winter.
Any concern with rodents, attracting rodents?
Well,
Having a compost
it-
in the backyard?
well, that's why they say not to put meat in it. And we were talking about this with Susan Snipes, who has Snipes Farm down in Morrisville, and she puts the meat scraps, and she lives in Yardley, so she doesn't live at the farm. She puts her meat scraps in a bucket in a separate situation, so they're kept separate. The rats will, it can be a problem, because they'll eat other stuff, but the meat is more of an attraction, I think. Set rat traps in your compost pile.
I haven't seen any,
You haven't seen any?
no.
That's good.
Voles once in a while, but they're
Kinda
easy.
everywhere,
They're
yeah.
everywhere, but you can trap them.
Yeah.
They're easy enough, but as long as you don't put meat or bones and any type of animal product in, it seems to be, I've been 25 years composting and haven't had any problems at all.
The one animal product that I've read that is safe to use in a compost bin is eggshells.
Yeah, I do put eggshells in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
crumble them up,
Right.
because they take a while
They do
to
take a
decompose, and the
long time.
worms have a hard time with them.
Yeah.
Any citrus peels too take a long time to break down.
Right, and citrus you should be cautious with citrus, because you might have seen citrus used as an insecticide and stuff. So those heavy oils in the citrus can actually kill insects and kill things. So I guess if you go wild for grapefruit one winter, don't put them all in your compost pile at once.
You can make candied citrus peels instead.
Oh, those are good.
Yep.
Lots of sugar, though. All right, now we're back to, okay, Donna, back to the slideshow.
Okay, so you go back here.
Oh, there it is, okay.
Do you know where you're going
Yeah,
here?
I'm going down, yeah, I'm going down. Let me just-
Sure.
Yeah, okay. What's that from? All right, so it's pretty much what we just talked about. The green, the leaves, if you, are easy to stockpile, and if you have a shredder, or can borrow a shredder, they'll reduce by 8 times. So you can really, especially your maple, especially silver maple, they'll really reduce. And then you can just add them into your compost pile, your kitchen scraps, shredded leaves, kitchen scraps, shredded leaves. All right. How many of you have heard of square foot gardening? There we go. Some of you probably. So square foot gardening, I'm going to show you a video. It's very precise
Yes.
way to compose and structure your raised bed garden. But there are many ways to design a raised bed. Thank you. Wait a minute. Shoot, there.
You want to go to the video, right?
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Which one?
Yeah, square foot. Yeah. I thought oh, that's weird.
If there was a method of gardening which promised 100% of the harvest using just 20% of the space and only 2% of the work, most gardeners would be very interested. In fact, there is a method which claims to do just that. Square foot gardening is a simple way to create easy to manage raised beds that need a minimum of time spent maintaining them. So, how does it work, and what do you need to know before planting a square foot garden?
Square foot gardening was developed by retired engineer Mel Bartholomew in the 1970s. He used his analytical skills as an engineer to eliminate the inefficiencies he saw in traditional gardening methods. In particular, he found the average gardener was spending hours weeding the big gaps between long rows of plants, creating unnecessary work for themselves. Square foot gardening rapidly gained popularity during the 1980s through Mel's first book and television series. Mel's work is carried on through the Square Foot Gardening Foundation, which promotes the method around the world. The building blocks of the square foot gardening method are raised beds, typically 4 feet by 4 feet and 6 to 12 inches deep. Almost anyone will be able to reach into the middle of the bed with these dimensions. These raised beds can be placed on any surface in your garden, grass, soil or concrete. It doesn't really matter what's underneath, because each raised bed will be filled with a rich, moisture retentive soil. On top of this, add a 1 foot by 1 foot grid. Mel suggests making this out of wood as it makes it easier to work with later on. These beds mean there's no need to walk on your soil, which risks compacting it and reducing drainage. Keeping off the soil is common practice now, but in the 1970s it was unheard of. How else would you weed along that 30-foot row? The second vital building block is the soil. Known as Mel's Mix, this is seen as a key part of square foot gardening. It's made from 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 vermiculite, which is a mined and processed mineral, which helps to retain moisture in the mix and also keeps it airy, and 1/3 blended potting soils or compost. Either use your own compost if you make it, or buy several different types and mix them together. Increasingly, many people prefer more sustainable alternatives to peat moss, in which case a blended mix of coir and potting soil can be used as a substitute for the first third. The mix is lightweight, making it easy to work with, and nutrient rich, so it has all the necessary goodness for raising great plants without ever having to add fertiliser. Just top up the beds with more mix if they need it. Many people add a layer of potting soil or compost at the start of the year. Each 1 foot square is planted with just one type of crop. Across your raised bed, it's recommended that you plant each square with different crops and companion planting flowers. So in this 4 feet by 4 feet bed, you could plant 16 different crop types. To keep the planting simple, there are no plant spacings to remember. Instead, each square has either 1, 4, 9 or 16 plants in it, depending on the size of the plant. Easy to position in each square by making a smaller grid in the soil with your fingers. It really is that simple. The garden planner makes it easy to plan out square foot beds with the correct number of plants in each square. Enable the square foot gardening mode by clicking the SFG button. Now when you select a crop, the garden planner will give you a 1 foot square block that can be easily dropped into place. The number indicates how many of that crop you can grow in the space. Plan out your bed in this way and then use the plant list to see how many of each plant you need to grow. Climbing plants such as peas, beans and cucumbers should be placed along one edge so they can climb up supportive netting. Other crops such as fruit bushes, which don't fit into square foot gardening squares, will automatically retain their standard spacing, and if you want to plant traditional rows of crops, just switch off SFG mode and add them as usual. In traditional gardening methods, you would use most of the packet of seeds along a whole row and then thin out the seedlings to the correct spacings. In square foot gardening, you use just a small pinch of seeds in each planting space, usually 2 or 3 seeds. With this approach, you use less seed than you would if you were using traditional methods. And thinning out is now simplified too. You don't have to worry about the correct spacings. If 2 or 3 seedlings grow, you can just use scissors to snip off the weaker ones. That way you won't disturb the roots of the strongest seedlings, a common problem if you pull up or transplant the extras. It's easy to create structures for the raised beds which will protect your crops and help them to grow. A cage made out of chicken wire will protect it from pets and large pests like squirrels or birds. A dome support can be covered with plastic to keep out a spell of poor weather, or with horticultural fleece to reduce frost damage. And a plant support can easily be created, either at the back so beans and peas can climb up them, or across the top of the bed to provide support to crops such as tomatoes. The all-new Square Foot Gardening book contains full plans of how to make these structures yourself. Square foot gardening is an almost fail-safe way to get started with growing your own, but it's not to everyone's taste. The experienced gardener can quickly outgrow the method, particularly if they want to grow large quantities of crops such as potatoes, fruit bushes, and perennial plants such as rhubarb and artichoke, without the expense of the special Mel's Mix soil and raised beds.
Square foot gardening works brilliantly for beginners, for those who only have a small amount of space, and for creating low maintenance gardens close to the house to grow high value crops. That's why 35 years on, square foot gardening is still going strong.
Oh, right. All right, these are just, so now we're on to just regular beds and some fun things people have done. Isn't that cute? So maybe you have
Speak in the microphone, please.
oh, yes, maybe you have, thank you.
Oh, okay, hold on a second. Yeah, you keep going.
I'll keep going, okay. You could just put your raised beds on a video. I'm on a video, geez, on a terrace, on a patio. You could build high ones, or have someone build them, and then there's not all that bending. You want to use a rot-resistant wood, though, so pine would probably not be a good idea. You could have multiple use. And find other uses for things that get discarded. I can't quite figure out what these things are. Truck beds, or I don't know. And look at this slide on the upper left. That's what they started out with. And then they constructed these raised beds, put a fence around it, a garden gate, and that's what they ended up with, instead of a place to park their lawns, their cars. So now we're going to talk about vertical gardening. You can increase the amount you raise, whether it's flowers. There are a lot of flowers that you can use vertical gardening with, and certainly for vegetable gardening. Chicken wire. I tend to find things in people's trash that could be really useful. My car's big enough to slide over and really get them quickly. You can make a really simple lattice. You can buy netting now that will really be simple to put up. More complex. You can see that you can walk under that. This is in Lisa White's backyard. She's one of our board members, and her husband made these. I keep pointing to this screen. He made, if you look on your lower right, he used nylon heavy string to make them himself. Get creative. Use what you have. If you have trees you've taken down, small trees or saplings, you look on the left, that looks like bamboo. There's often people mistakenly plant bamboo, and they're happy to have you come and take it away as much as you want to take, right? Should be illegal. It is illegal
is.
a lot of places. Is it in your?
To some degree, yeah.
You can make beautiful ones out of wire mesh. Make a teepee. Use PVC pipe with holes cut in it. You can make a small one of these or a more elaborate one. Pallets. You can become a pallet connoisseur, knowing which ones would work and which ones don't. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
And it's a relatively simple design. You'd probably need someone to help you with it, but it's relatively simple. Boxes, old shutters. Those are for little cactuses and stuff. They don't need much dirt. Or just straight up the wall, chicken wire. You can hang things on that. You can let things grow in it themselves against your wall. You just want to leave enough room so that there's airspace for air to circulate, and also it's probably not too good for your house to have something really jammed up against it. container gardens. You can get creative. You can hang them on the side of a porch. Put them on a deck. Use tubs. If you use tubs, you want to make sure there's a way to drain. You put, I don't know how you would drill something like that, but you could make sure you put rocks or bricks or something at the very bottom, or a mesh screen, and then make sure you don't overwater. Burlap coffee bags. If you have a coffee roaster or a coffee company here that brings in the beans themselves, I'd be happy to give them to you. If you want some, just tell Donna and I can get you some. I tried Saturday, Betty, you'd just given them all away. Beautiful buckets, beautiful containers, old things, new things, yard sale things. Maybe there's a colander that got too dented to use or something, but you're never going to see it when it's all planted up. Old logs, old bird baths that don't hold water, but they're fine for planting. Shoes, plates. You just get creative. Depends on how funky you want to look, I guess. Old wheelbarrows. The chair was a fun one on the lower left. Do not use tires for anything that's going to have food in it because they leach heavy metals. You might see that advice somewhere, but I wouldn't do it. Look at those. Those are probably shoes, right? And some sort of fabric bag or clothes bags. They may not last that long because they're probably vulnerable to sunlight deterioration of the plastic. That's a nice one to, both of these are really nice because you can walk through it easily, you can see it easily, see everything easily, visually, really pretty. You won't be stepping on the soil. Get more elaborate with cinder blocks. You can also build raised beds, out of cinder blocks and then plant in those holes along the edges of the cinder blocks. Helps the visuals on cinder blocks. There you go. This is, I don't know if you can tell what's going on, but this is a way of growing potatoes. You have 2 buckets the same size, and you cut out 4 windows. And then you nestle the one with the cutouts in the big one. And then you plant, or is it the other way around? Yeah, you plant in there. And you can plant potatoes in there. Old crates, those look like potatoes. Hang things. Old cheap dressers. Those are troughs for watering animals. Huge baskets. Pallets. Look at that. That's weed control for you. A pallet, upended, painted, and then you hang your baskets on that. Rain gutters. A built one. And if you don't, if you want just a small garden, this is a great way to go. More elaborate one. There's troughs once again. Probably available at Lowe's and Home Depot. Straw or hay bale gardening. Now, it does make a difference. Straw or hay, you always want to use straw. Do you know about hay bale gardening?
What's the difference?
The hay is, as hay plants, the hay grasses mature, you cut them right before they flower, and that contains the most amount of energy and nutrition for the animals, and you let it dry. Straw is from wheat or rye or oats, and it's already matured, and there's nothing left in the plant, so that there's nothing left nutritionally for your plants either. You get your hay bales, and you want to get organic because there's residual chemicals in that hay. You really don't want to go with non-organic hay. You water it, I think, for 4 weeks or something, and it'll start to get warm in there. And once it starts to rot, you plant right in the hay, the rotten hay. And by the end of the summer, it's pretty much decomposed. You have to water. I tried it one season. My friend Susan Bartles is the one who did this program for us, and she had great success with it. But she must have been more vigilant about watering.
It dries out really fast.
It dries out really fast, and I think maybe wrapping it with plastic, a heavy plastic, would work. But it does dry out pretty fast. I'm not sure what other solution is, but she had great success with hers. But don't use straw. You make a spiral garden, and what's nice about that is you create slightly different habitats within that spiral. So for plants that like it hot and drier, you can put them on the top. For things that like it cooler or wetter, you can put them on the bottom. And it's a narrower space to harvest your herbs from. Not so spread out. It's a way to use all those pavers. A beautiful way to use those pavers people like so much. And it's permanent. Again, you've created this lovely permanent garden. Metal troughs. Pretty little garden. In a garden this size, with all those wooden beds, you can grow an enormous amount of food if you know how to keep planting throughout the season and put new plants in, new seeds in. If you have money, you can do this, right? And somebody to hire to do it for you. Hire you. Well, I do gardening for people, but I don't do this. I just go in and weed and plant and stuff.
Oh, I'm a landscape designer.
Oh, okay,
Installer,
good.
yeah.
Well, you should give me your card in case I have clients, because I do want to often refer people for more extensive work,
Okay.
especially for using natives and all that stuff. There was something I wanted to say, but now I forget what it is. Yeah. Let's go back to the clock. Is that my last? Yep, that's it. Let's go there. Oh, that's a good way to do it. Okay. Is there a video on? Go back to those videos for a second.
I wasn't sure. I know it's 90 something.
More space. We did this.
Okay.
It's causing more than the space you have.
I thought, was that a video? I don't know.
That's what you get in the garden.
Yeah.
Hello and a very warm welcome back to Hughes Nursery. It's such a beautiful evening here in Wales.
This is a really wonderful, inventive idea. It's so clever. And I bet none of you experienced gardeners have heard of this. This was so...
And we've come to the end of our pea season, and the peas that are left here growing, we're going to let them dry out, and then we're going to save those seeds to plant next year. Anyway, over the past growing season, I filmed the whole process from planting all the way through to saving seeds. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can grow peas successfully in your vegetable garden. So my favourite method of growing peas is using the rain gutter method. Now, the reason why we do this is because we've had problems with vermin, such as mice, digging along and eating the pea seeds. However, you can follow exactly the same process directly into your raised beds or garden beds. So here I simply put a 1 inch or 2.5 centimetre layer of fresh compost, and then I planted at an inch intervals 3 pea seeds. Now I do this every inch, and I usually do 3, and this will be enough to have a very good crop. And then I simply fill this over the top with a bit of soil. And then, using the rain gutter method, you want to place this in a high position where mice or other vermin can't get hold of your seeds, because they go along and simply chop the shoots off, which is very soul destroying indeed. And here you can see that the pea seeds are beginning to sprout, and I usually do about 3 rain gutters on a succession plant of about 3 weeks per sowing. This is so we have a succession planting and we don't end up with all the peas all at once. And now you use a trellis. Now you can use whatever trellis you want. My dad really enjoys banging in the posts here. All this is some fencing and some old fence posts, and this works really well. And then I'm going to use a hoe, and this is a really clever thing about the rain gutter method for growing peas. If you use a hoe and dig a trench about 2 inches, so 5 centimetres deep, and make sure the hoe is about 3 to 5 inches wide, so that's about 7 to 10 centimetres, and then simply get the rain gutter. Make sure you've given your pea seeds a good watering, so a good soaking, and this will allow them to simply slide off the rain gutter, so it's so simple and easy to sow them, and it's also really satisfying putting them down. And then simply use your hands to cover the sides, and then soon your peas will start growing really quickly. But if you have a trellis where there's a bit of a gap, then you need some support, and this is where pea sticks come in. And pea sticks are really simple to make. All you need is some old branches, and then you simply cut them to size and then place them by your young pea seedlings. So to the right you can see more advanced peas growing there, and then to the left you can see the young newly planted peas, which will need a little bit of help so they can climb up and reach the trellis there at the top. And then the peas will just start growing, and then you'll start to see the flowers, and this is exciting, and before you know it, your first pea pods will start to happen. So the really easy way of working out when to open a pea pod is by simply pressing it, and as long as it's firm to the press and quite big, then simply opening it up and your peas will be ready to eat. If it does give way a little bit, then leave the pea pod on for another 2 to 3 days so they can fully ripen. And then for saving seeds, this is also really easy. All you want to do is say about 20 pea pods, let these just stay on the pea plant, and then wait for them to dry out. And then when they dry out and turn brown, you can then collect these pea seeds, and these will be sown for next year, which is really exciting. And peas are so simple to grow. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found this useful and that you're now ready to grow your own peas at home. And if you have any further comments or questions regarding growing peas or any other vegetables for that matter, then do not hesitate to ask me down below in the comment section. Also follow me on Instagram, but most importantly, make sure you're subscribed to Hughes Nursery, where I show you how you can grow organic produce inexpensively. Until next time, goodbye.
Let me just check the list. One other one. Oh. We didn't do the lasagna garden though, right? Okay, there's one other one I'd like to show you. And that's called lasagna garden. Oh, I wanted to just, how many of you grow peas or eat peas that you have the shell? Great. You can take those spent pea seeds, pea pods, and use them to make a vegetable broth. You just boil them, simmer them a little bit, and extract that flavor from the pods that are too tough to eat, but you get this lovely pea flavor. And I also found, I froze a lot of beans last year, and I snipped the ends, and I just took all those ends, and I put those in a soup stock. It worked really well. Get this lovely beany flavor. How many have heard of lasagna gardening? Or sheet mulching? Anybody hear of that? All right. Well, this is an old permaculture method, which I could go into, but of starting a bed without digging and without a lot of work. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I have my handler here reminding me to do it the right way.
Hi, I'm Tricia, an organic gardener. I grow organically for a healthy and safe food supply, for a clean and sustainable environment, for an enjoyable and rewarding experience. Did you ever wish that there was a no-dig way to prepare a great garden bed? Well, there is. It's called sheet layering or lasagna gardening. You're gonna like this lasagna. Lasagna gardening is a slow compost process with no tilling. You can start your lasagna garden any time of the year, but you want to make sure that the vegetation underneath the site is short, or mow it short. One of the great things about lasagna gardening is you don't have to pull out most kinds of weeds. If you have something really persistent like bindweed, blackberries, crabgrass, or morning glory, pull those out before you start. Lay down 4 to 6 layers of overlapping newspaper or cardboard. This is a light blocking layer that will kill weeds and then compost them into a rich humus or soil. On a windy day, you can sprinkle it with a little bit of water so that the newspaper doesn't blow away. The next layer is the nitrogen-rich chicken manure from my chicken. Other nitrogen-rich materials include blood meal, soybean meal, grass clippings, food scraps, coffee grounds that have been already used. You can even use weeds as long as there's no seed heads. Now we're going to layer some carbon material. These can include things like pine needles, dried leaves, sawdust, straw. This method of gardening is easy, but the trade-off is that it isn't quick. Expect your bed to take between 3 to 6 months, sometimes as long as a year to be fully composted. Plan accordingly. The bed I'm making in early spring will be perfect for fall planting. My old corn stalks. Just add water to your lasagna garden as you go. And now another nitrogen layer. Keep layering like this in alternating layers until your bed reaches 18 inches to 3 feet. Again, you don't have to do this all at once. You can build your lasagna garden as you go, as you get materials. If you have a hard time finding the materials you need for your lasagna garden, go to the store. Lots of local coffee shops and even some local grocers will have the nitrogen sources that you need. Edible lasagna ends with cheese. We're going to end with a carbon layer here to make sure that we keep the moisture in and the flies out, and also water at the very end. You can build your lasagna garden in a casserole dish. Just build a raised bed. For more information and options about that, watch our raised bed video. You can put burlap over your lasagna garden, or if you live in an area with high rainfall or you're worried about critters, you can use this Compost Tex compost cover. This can be used for any kind of compost pile. The cover is great for keeping your bed moist while shedding rain and snow melt, and to help keep your bed from getting too wet. An alternative method, if you want to plant in your lasagna garden right away, forget the compost cover, put 3 inches of compost right on top of the straw, and you can plant right away. To maintain your bed, simply add more layers And you can be a garden chef. Make your lasagna garden and grow organic for life.
Okay, any questions about that one? I would add more layers than 4 to 6. I think I would add more like 8 to really smother those weeds. You can also edge it, like use a sharp-edged spade to edge away. Oh, this I didn't change this slide. I'm so sorry. I have to retell you. I think I told you about our programs. Anybody interested in doing any of those methods? Lasagna gardening, raised beds? No? The raised bed, yeah. And you could, the raised beds are really great because you contain it, you keep your soil, it allows you to control the moisture better, the weeds better. It's a much, much better way to do it. And there's lots and lots of endlessly mind-boggling amounts of information out there on it. Any questions about any of this?
You probably should engage with the audience. Yeah, thank you.
Anything else?
Any questions?
Nope.
Questions? Okay.
No, and this is going to be on the, we're recording this.
Okay.
So all our residents will be able to have access to this on YouTube.
Great.
Through our EAC webpage with the township.
Okay.
So anybody that's interested in any those types of gardening methods will have access to this.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. I'm so sorry. I got so busy with other stuff. I forgot to change those slides that had our programs because we created this last year. Can I send that information?
Certainly.
Would you be able to change? You can change
Yeah,
that out.
we can
Okay.
change that, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, wonderful. And then there are a couple more pages. The Grow Veg, they've got really nice websites, that English guy. They've got really nice videos, short, good information. Some of them are obviously, some of the ones we looked at were just awful. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
coming out.
Pamphlets in the back?
I have some information in the back. I would love it if you would, people would do a evaluation